Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. Greenland and Denmark officials are in Washington, D.C. today to meet with Vice President JD Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. President Trump wants Greenland to become U.S. territory. The U.S. is freezing all visa processing for 75 countries, Somalia, Russia, Iran, and Thailand among those affected. Tensions are rising in Iran, the U.S. now withdrawing some personnel from a nearby U.S. military base in Qatar. Trump says he's axing funding to so-called sanctuary cities. He says they're protecting criminals. The move is likely to face legal challenges, though. The Supreme Court allowing a challenge to the counting of late mail-in ballots to move forward. Illinois Republican congressman brought the case.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
And some big news. The U.S. is now entering the second part of peace plans in Gaza in an attempt to bring an end to the conflict in the region. Phase 2 establishes the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza. That's a transitional administration for the Gaza Strip. The announcement was made on X by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff as part of the president's 20-point plan to end the Gaza conflict. The Post also noted this phrase marks the start of a full demilitarization and reconstruction of Gaza. Witkoff adding that the U.S. expects Hamas to fully comply with its obligations. This includes returning the final deceased hostage. This follows Phase 1, where humanitarian aid was delivered, a ceasefire maintained, and all living hostages returned. The U.S. is pausing all visa processing for 75 countries, including Somalia, Russia, Nigeria, and Thailand. Fox News obtained a memo from the State Department. It said the pause on visas will begin January 21st and continue indefinitely. In the meantime, the department will reassess its screening and vetting procedures, the White House later reposting the Fox News report. It's part of an effort to make sure the visa applicants don't become a public charge. That means someone who relies on welfare. Other countries affected include Afghanistan, Brazil, Cuba, Colombia, Iran, Pakistan, and Syria. Now, the change comes amid nationwide attention on alleged fraud in Minnesota, with many of those accused immigrants from Somalia. And the U.S. is withdrawing some personnel from a key U.S. military base in Qatar. The move comes amid rising tensions with Iran. Several outlets initially reported on the move, citing an anonymous source. Qatar now confirming the reports, saying such measures were in fact being taken. It said in response to the current regional tensions, the Pentagon declining to comment on questions about the move, though. The State Department also no immediate comment on the potential for any security alerts to be issued for American civilians, but we'll keep you updated. Meanwhile, in Iran, the head of the nation's judiciary says there will be fast trials ahead for detained protesters. Now, that's despite President Trump repeatedly warning that the U.S. may take military action over violence against protesters. A 26-year-old demonstrator is scheduled to be publicly executed today. Trump is warning the U.S. that the U.S. will take strong action if Iran starts hanging protesters. He made the comments during a CBS interview just yesterday.
Out the hanging, if they hang them, you're going to see some things that I don't know what where you come from and what your thought process is, but you'll perhaps be very happy.
What do you mean by that?
We will take very strong action. If they do such a thing, we will take very strong action.
And this strong action you're talking about, what's the end game?
The end game is to win. I like winning.
How do you define that in Iran?
Well, let's define it in Venezuela. Let's define it with al-Baghdadi. He was wiped out.
Now, earlier yesterday, Trump encouraged protesters continue demonstrating. In a Truth Social post, he said, "Save the names of the killers and abusers. They will pay a big price," adding that help is on the way. An activist group in Iran says SpaceX has activated free Starlink across the country. In a post on X, the group Nasnet said Elon Musk's service has waived subscription fees for anyone inside Iran. In the post, the group also urged people not to forget physical camouflage, hiding the Starlink IP, and changing the wireless network name. NASDAQ said earlier that coordination with Starlink engineers significantly reduced data disruptions linked to the regime's interference. Did caution, though, that continued jamming could still impair internet connectivity. Starlink did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The fallout over massive alleged fraud in Minnesota continues. President Trump said the government will suspend payments to so-called sanctuary cities that defy federal immigration enforcement. In a Truth Social post this morning, the president said the payments would end on February 1st. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on that, plus the president's comments on the recent ICE-involved fatal shooting.
President Trump made the announcement that the government will cut off funding to so-called sanctuary cities during a speech in Detroit.
Starting February 1st, we're not making any payments to sanctuary cities or states having sanctuary cities because they do everything possible to protect criminals at the expense of American citizens, and it breeds fraud and crime.
President Trump says massive illegal immigration places a heavy burden on the country.
No country can afford to take in millions of people, pay for their education, their health care, their hospitals. You just can't do it. And we all have a heart. You can't do it.
While also putting Americans in danger.
But many of those people are murderers. They're people released from jails, prisons, mental institutions, insane asylums. They're people that are drug dealers. They're addicts.
Trump's latest comments on the issue come as the president faces increasing opposition in Democratic-led areas to his immigration policy. That resistance intensified in the wake of the ICE-involved fatal shooting of protester Renee Good, who hit an ICE agent with her vehicle in Minneapolis. Trump discussed Good on CBS.
I want to say to the father that I love all of our people, and I would bet you that she, under normal circumstances, was a very solid, wonderful person, but, you know, her actions were pretty tough.
Trump's move to defund sanctuary cities is expected to face challenges in the court. In April, a court prohibited a push by Trump to rescind funding for jurisdictions deemed to be sanctuaries. Homeland Security Advisor Stephen Miller says there has been a huge increase in arrests of what he called domestic insurgents in recent days, and says those numbers are going to go up, speaking on Fox News.
They train their insurgents on how to block ICE vehicles, how to try to free arrestees, and then they dox ICE officers, they follow them home, they follow them to where they sleep at night. So again, it's a sophisticated insurgency involving a large number of radicalized, extremist, violent left-wing operators stoked by the Democrat Party.
And President Trump says his administration plans to imprison any fraudster, politician, or public official involved in what he called sick plots to loot and pillage the country.
Our country wasn't built by people who tried to lie and cheat and scam their way to success. It was built by legends like Henry Ford, Henry Dow, Thomas Edison.
The president also vowed to deport those who rob Americans.
We're also going to revoke the citizenship of any naturalized immigrant from Somalia or anywhere else who is convicted of defrauding our citizens. We're going to get them the hell out of here fast.
Homeland Security announced yesterday that the United States has terminated Somalia's designation for temporary protected status effective on March 17th.
The cancellation of status means Somali nationals in the U.S. who do not have a legal status must leave the country by the deadline. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And the president's push to put Greenland in the hands of the United States is now front and center. Officials from Greenland and Denmark are in Washington, D.C. today, with foreign ministers from the Arctic region meeting with Vice President JD Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has more.
Today's meetings with the foreign ministers from Greenland and Denmark comes as President Trump doubles down on security concerns in the region. This morning, the president posted, NATO should be leading the way for us to get it. If we don't, Russia or China will, and that's not going to happen. NATO becomes far more formidable and effective with Greenland in the hands of the United States. Anything less than that is unacceptable. The prime ministers of the two areas spoke yesterday about the message they plan to emphasize at the White House meeting.
If we have to choose between the USA and Denmark here and now, we choose Denmark. We choose NATO, we choose the Kingdom of Denmark, we choose the EU.
We want to engage in dialogue and we want to cooperate. We are not looking for conflict, but our message is clear. Greenland is not for sale.
The president has repeatedly emphasized the lack of defense in the Arctic to protect from Russian and Chinese ambitions.
You know what their defense is? 2 dog sleds. In the meantime, you have Russian destroyers and submarines and China destroyers and submarines all over the place.
But Congress is split on the president's goals in the Arctic. A bipartisan group of lawmakers, mostly Democrats, is pushing legislation to prevent President Trump from taking military action in Greenland. But yesterday, House Speaker Mike Johnson downplayed the idea that the U.S. military will get involved.
There's no declaration of war pending for Greenland. It's just not a thing. I don't anticipate any boots on the ground anywhere anytime soon.
The Danish ambassador is also set to meet today with lawmakers from the Arctic caucus, including Senator Lisa Murkowski and Senator Angus King. Senator Murkowski is one who has been so far critical of the White House's comments on Greenland. She's part of a congressional delegation that will travel to Denmark later this week. It's a group made up of mostly Democrats, but a few Republicans. They plan to travel to Denmark to further discuss the issue and show congressional support for NATO. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
And still to come, the U.S. Supreme Court seems inclined to uphold state bans on boys and girls sports. We have the details after the break. And former Secretary of State Hilary Clinton defying a subpoena to testify amid a Jeffrey Epstein probe. House Republicans now seeking to hold her in contempt of Congress after the break. Welcome back. I'm Paul Graney. The Supreme Court is allowing a challenge to the counting of late mail-in ballots to move forward. Illinois Republican Congressman Mike Bost brought the case. Illinois had argued that allowing the lawsuit would encourage more election litigation and cause chaos for election officials. Illinois law allows ballots postmarked by Election Day to be counted if they are received up to 2 weeks late. More than a dozen states and the District of Columbia accept mail-in ballots received after Election Day, as long as they're postmarked on or before that date. President Donald Trump has weighed in on the issue before, arguing that late ballots and delayed electoral counts undermine confidence in elections. We'll keep you updated on that. And the Supreme Court heard oral arguments yesterday over 2 states' restrictions on transgender athletes. The states argue that in women's sports, biology matters. NTD's Arlene Richards has the details.
Attorneys for Idaho and West Virginia argued on Tuesday that their states' laws treat all men and all women equally and don't classify on the basis of gender identity.
Idaho's law classifies on the basis of sex because sex is what matters in sports. It correlates strongly with countless athletic advantages like size, muscle mass, bone mass, and heart and lung capacity. Tragically, but not surprisingly, male athletes have even injured female athletes in many sports. If women don't have their own competitions, they won't be able to compete.
The states appeared before the Supreme Court in an effort to overturn lower court rulings that say laws restricting transgender athletes in girls' sports discriminate based on sex. Transgender athletes in both states argue their right to compete on the girls' teams is guaranteed by Title IX, a landmark civil rights law that prohibits sex-based discrimination. They say their gender identity matches the sex category of the law. Idaho Solicitor General said gender identity doesn't matter in sports, and the purpose of Idaho's law is to preserve women's equal opportunity.
Denying special treatment isn't classifying on the basis of transgender status. It's consciously choosing not to.
Justice Sonia Sotomayor pushed back on his characterization of the case.
Who identifies as a female, but it's a male, is being excluded from a female sport, correct?
That's correct.
All right. By its nature, that's a sex classification.
Justice Neil Gorsuch asked the big question about whether transgender people should be considered a legally protected class. The Idaho plaintiff has decided to drop the case, but the state of Idaho wanted the Supreme Court to decide the case anyway. The second case the court heard on Tuesday out of West Virginia deals with many of the same issues. Chief Justice Roberts asked the Idaho attorney if a win in favor of the plaintiffs could have wider effects.
My point was more that how we approach the situation of looking at it not as boys versus girls, but whether or not there should be an exception with respect to the definition of girls. That would, if we adopted that, that would have to apply across the board and not simply to the area of athletics.
Outside, demonstrators gathered ahead of the arguments. After the arguments were over, attorneys for each side and female athletes appeared outside to speak with the press.
The simple reality of this case is that we're talking about simple biology. There are men and women, and Title IX and equal protection should allow boys to participate in boys sports and girls to participate in girls sports.
Today we had a chance to tell the Supreme Court the reality of what it's like to be a girl like Becky, who just wants to be able to play on a team with her friends and have fun.
We are here because we value fairness and safety in women's sports. We know what is at stake when states can't provide these protections to athletes.
The Justice Department weighed in for the Trump administration in support of the states. U.S. Solicitor General John Sauer sat in the court's packed audience. The Trump administration is currently suing states that don't bar transgender athletes from women's sports. The court's final ruling in Tuesday's case could decide the fate of women's sports in the future. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And staying on the Supreme Court's hearing, our next guest says that rather than embracing what's been called inclusion, we should actually be embracing exclusion. With us now is Alvin Louis. He is the president of Courage is a Habit. Alvin, as always, thank you for joining us. I want to get to your mantra of embrace exclusion in just a bit, but you were following yesterday's hearing pretty closely. What's your main takeaway?
Well, the first thing that was really encouraging was to seeing all the young athletes, middle school, high school athletes, females, that were out there fighting for this. It's sad that they have to, because certainly we don't imagine our daughters and nieces would, at that age, spend time screaming at adults, teachers and school counselors and coaches that they should not have boys in their locker rooms. Their boys should not beat them up and then be in the locker rooms with them. But to see that type of fight in the young people, because they grew up in the age of woke, in the age of identity politics, and they seen firsthand how corrosive inclusion and diversity is. I also saw some boys. I talked to a group of boys that were about high school age, I think sophomore, junior high, and just said, "Hey, thanks for coming out here." And a lot of them had the stories. They said, my sister's an athlete, my girlfriend's an athlete. And so to see the males, especially, because we certainly have a lack of strong males, because you even got some weak males pushing for this degeneracy. So that was the first thing. I felt that was really, really positive. But the energy was incredible. I heard that the crowd was even bigger than the Skormety case, which was banning the transgender drugs for kids last year.
And to your point, but the people who are protesting, sometimes it's considered not really politically correct to protest something like this. So to your point, it's interesting to see so many young people speaking out against it. Now, my sense, Alvin, is that the court seems inclined to uphold the state bans on the boys and girls sports. Listening to the justices, did you get that feeling?
I did. There was two things that came away with that, listening to the arguments. Is number one, it's like, why is the United States Supreme Court having to listen to something like this? Up till 5 minutes ago, not a single human being on earth ever questioned what is a man and what is a woman. That was not something anybody ever discussed. And if somebody did discuss it, we would put them in where they belong. We would isolate them where they belong, which is just a lunatic and a mentally ill person that needed help. But also, you also saw what happened to the argument on the justices who looked like they were citing to put men in women's private spaces and in sports, and that would hurt them. And they were the DEI hires. They were the DEI picks from the Biden administration. So those things have a long-term impact because you can see just the word salad argument that someone like Justice Brown had. It made no sense. No one knew what she was even talking about. And so that was also very shocking, I think, for a lot of people to hear a woman, just anybody, to try to argue that a man should be in a women's sports and not know what a sex is and all those different, jumping around, all those word salad. But no, certainly it is very promising that the justices will see it, I wouldn't say our way, just the way of reality. But however, I will say that doing what we do at Courage is a Habit, which is directly in K through 12, one of the downside of a case like this that goes and has so much attention is when it goes our way, the downside is that people go, yay, we won, we're done. The boys are out of the girls' sports.
Right.
And that's simply not the case. Parents still have to use this decision when it comes, hopefully in June or July, to make sure that the schools get the policies out of their systems. They will not do it voluntarily, even when the Supreme Court decides that. So the states that are not Virginia and Idaho need to use that precedence.
I think to one of your original points, one of the plaintiffs was asked during the hearing yesterday by one of the justices, well, how do you we know this, like, what is a woman? How do you define a woman? And he was like, I don't really have a definition. And then the justice is like, well, if you don't have a definition, how can we talk about it here? Which is, to your original point of this is such a modern phenomenon and a modern take, we cannot even have the concepts to even discuss it, which is quite remarkable. Alvin, talk to us a little bit about your mantra, embrace exclusion, and specifically how it applies here.
It applies everywhere. It applies to almost any issue that we have in this country. Because I would say the majority of the big issues that we have in this country, where there's open borders, allowing men and women's bathroom, allowing pornography in schools, keeping secrets from parents, allowing critical race theory in the schools, all those things, all those topics, while they're very vastly different topics, they all began the same. They weaponize people's kindness and they weaponize their empathy. And so the biggest lie that we've told people is that life is about inclusion, and somehow your morality social credit score is higher if you're inclusive. But because they weaponize that so much, and there's so much emotional blackmail with those kind of ideas, like diversity is our strength and you better have inclusion, you better embrace exclusion, or better embrace inclusion. The reason why that fools so many people is because they're kind, they're good people. And that's why they use it. But when they do that, people stop their critical thinking, because if anybody took 5 seconds time out and thought about it, they cannot come up with not a single part of life that's inclusive, especially if you're a parent. If you're a parent, you think about when you bring your baby home, how many people did you let hold your baby? Very few. When they start crawling around, they're excluded from even their own house. You isolate them from the bathroom, the den, the garage. And when they get older, you exclude most of the content they can consume. They can only consume very little content. You exclude the majority of people to be their friends. You want to curate their friends. Over and over and over again, life is about exclusion. I am on your wonderful show and I'm honored, but I was invited. I can't just show up and be like, hi. And you're like, wait a minute, you're not a guest? What are you doing? And I go, what's a guest? What's a guest? I don't know. What's a guest? I'm just here. So life is about exclusion. You have to embrace exclusion, because, and that's not, this mantra is nothing new. We all naturally do it. It's called drawing boundaries. People can't just walk into your house. They can't take your car, and they certainly can't come and invade your children's mind and hearts with their values. And in this particular case, especially if you're a father, men cannot come into your daughters and your wives and your girlfriends and your nieces' bathrooms and locker rooms and sports and invade them. You must embrace exclusion. We've all done it. We've all done it. We all naturally know how to do it. This is truly a social contagion.
That's an interesting take. Alvin Louis, president of Courage is a Habit. Alvin, as always, thank you.
Thank you so much.
And now, House Republicans planning to hold Hilary Clinton in contempt of Congress. It comes after she refused to testify today amid the probe into Jeffrey Epstein. Here's House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer reacting to her no-show.
I don't think it's any secret. Former Secretary of State Hilary Clinton joined her husband in defying a bipartisan lawful congressional subpoena to show up today. I think what's most disappointing to the Oversight Committee is the fact that we have, in good faith, negotiated with the Clintons' attorneys for 5 months. Throughout the past 5 months, they've implied to us they were trying to make a date work.
In a letter to Comer, the Clintons called the subpoenas, quote, legally invalid, and said they don't plan to show up. Comer said he plans to have the Oversight Committee vote on holding both Clintons in criminal contempt. Once it passes, it will go to the full House floor for a vote. The committee chairman also is saying he's disappointed that no Democrats in the committee showed up today, despite voting in favor of subpoenaing the Clintons. Comer told reporters his committee is serious about the Epstein probe and seeks to have Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell testify as well. The Clintons have not been accused of any wrongdoing in relation to Epstein. Now, FBI agents searched a Washington Post reporter's home today as part of an investigation into a government contractor. The Post reported that the contractor is accused of taking home government secrets. The Post reported that agents also searched journalist Hannah Nathanson's devices and seized a phone and a Garmin watch at her Virginia home. Attorney General Pam Bondi says the search was done at the Pentagon's request as part of a leak investigation. According to an affidavit, the search was related to investigation into a system administrator in Maryland. The individual was charged earlier this month with unlawful retention of national defense information. The suspect held a top secret security clearance and is accused of printing classified and sensitive reports at work. According to court documents, authorities found documents marked, quote, secret during a search of his Maryland home and car this month. Interesting. And Senator Elise Slotkin says she is under federal investigation over a video urging members of the military and intelligence community to refuse so-called illegal orders. Slotkin disclosed the probe in an interview with the New York Times, saying she was notified by the Office of U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro. The video was released last month. It featured 6 Democratic lawmakers, all former military or intelligence officials, warning that the administration posed a threat to the Constitution. They didn't specify what orders they considered unlawful, but the investigation follows separate action against Senator Mark Kelly. War Secretary Pete Hegseth accusing Kelly of undermining military discipline. Hegseth writing on X, Mark Kelly and 5 other members of Congress released a reckless and seditious video that was clearly intended to undermine good order and military discipline. And the former father-in-law of the woman killed in an ICE shooting in Minnesota is remembering her as an amazing person. Timothy Macklin told CNN he doesn't blame Renee Good or ICE. Good was married to Macklin's son. They had a child together before Macklin's son died. Macklin mentioned seeing the video and it being hard to react in a situation like that. He went on to say everybody makes bad choices, adding that if Good had been walking with God, she would not have been there. And a grand jury in Mississippi indicted a 19-year-old after he confessed to setting fire to the oldest synagogue in the state. Stephen Pittman is facing a charge of first-degree arson of a place of worship with a hate crime enhancement. He's scheduled to return to court on January 20th. The Hinds County DA's office said it appears the fire was, quote, alleged to have been motivated by religious hatred. Pittman could face up to 6 decades in prison on state charges if convicted. And the parent company of Saks Fifth Avenue filed for bankruptcy protection yesterday. Marks the first major retailer bankruptcy of the new year. Here's more.
Saks Global filed for bankruptcy protection late on Tuesday. It marks one of the largest retail collapses since the pandemic. And it comes barely a year after a deal that brought Saks Fifth Avenue under the same roof as Bergdorf Goodman and Neiman Marcus. The announcement led to uncertainty over the future of US luxury fashion, although the high-end department store said it would stay open for now. That after it finalised a $1.75 billion financing package and hired a new chief executive. Richard Baker will be replaced by former CEO of Neiman Marcus, Jeffrey Van Rijndonk. Baker led the acquisition strategy, which left Saks Global with debt. The company also hired other former Neiman Marcus executives in leading roles. Saks Global filed bankruptcy documents with a Texas court. It estimated its assets and liabilities were in a range of $1 billion to $10 billion. The court process is meant to give the luxury retailer room to negotiate a debt restructuring with creditors or find a new owner. But if that fails, the company may be forced to close. Saks is a retailer long loved by the rich and famous, but it fell on hard times after the pandemic as competition from online outlets rose. Brands also started selling more items through their own stores. The original Saks Fifth Avenue store was opened by retail pioneer Andrew Saks in 1867.
And still to come, Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi plans a snap election next month to gain support for spending and defense plans. And a train derailed in northeastern Thailand after a construction crane fell on its cars, killing dozens. We have an update on how the project is linked to China's Belt and Road Initiative after the break. I'm Paul Graney. This is World Watch. The State Department says that Venezuela has released multiple detained Americans, calling it an important step in the right direction. The release comes 10 days after U.S. forces captured former dictator Nicolas Maduro and his wife. The department declined to say just how many Americans were freed, though an official said diplomatic teams were involved in securing the releases. Venezuela says around 400 prisoners were freed so far, Venezuelan and non-Venezuelan, but rights groups report far lower numbers, between 60 and 70. Rights groups say that hundreds of political prisoners remain behind bars. The Venezuelan government denies holding people for political reasons, and it says it has already released most of the 2,000 people detained after protests following the contested 2024 election. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said today that social media platform X is acting to ensure full compliance with a new UK law. The move comes after the country launched a probe into the platform over explicit imagery produced by the Grok AI chatbot. Many of the images contained individuals in minimal attire. A new law making it an offense to create sexual deepfakes would come into force this week to tackle the images, with ex-owner Elon Musk saying today he wasn't aware of Grok generating explicit images of minors. He said the chatbot doesn't spontaneously generate images, it does so only according to user requests. Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi planning to dissolve parliament next week and call a snap election. The vote could be held as early as February 8th. Her party secretary says the ballot will allow voters to judge their new coalition with the conservative Japan Innovation Party. Takaichi is seeking public support for ambitious spending and defense plans that have unsettled financial markets. Observers say the election will also test public response to her fiscal policies and handling of relations with China. Politics took a brief backseat to music for South Korean and Japanese leaders this week. The Japanese Prime Minister and the South Korean President held a surprise drum session yesterday, briefly putting aside political discussions. This is the third time these two have met since October 2025, when Sanae Takaichi took office as the first Japanese female prime minister. The political relationship between the two countries has improved over the past few years, as officials there have focused on economic security matters. And now, mass protests against injustice have erupted in central China. It follows the sudden death of a 13-year-old student at his school just last week. The school attempted to get rid of the body secretly without letting the parents see it at all. Now, the parents are reportedly being silenced by local authorities. The actions have quickly sparked heavy criticism and suspicion around the case, with many people taking to the streets. What are they demanding from authorities, and why are they calling the incident a cover-up of crimes threatening people's safety around China? NTD's Flora Hua has the story. Just a warning, this report contains content that some viewers may find disturbing.
Media reports and videos show the school tried to transfer the student's body away with an ambulance right after he died. A truck reportedly drove by the student's uncle, who stopped the ambulance, urging him not to leave before his parents see the body. When the students' parents arrived, they saw blood on the corner of their child's mouth, and there was a nail-sized hole on his left chest, appearing to be a needle hole. Yet no one from the school could explain.
看看俺小孩给在学校里不明不白的就这样没有了，学校也不给俺们一个说话，不知道小孩是咋样没有的。到现在为止，学校也不出来一个人给俺一个说话，让俺们一直在这等。
The parents said they weren't aware of anything unusual regarding their child's health. The school reportedly failed to provide further information and refused to hand over CCTV footage, claiming the surveillance camera was broken. The lack of transparency drove many people to demonstrate in front of the school, including other students' parents. They are heard demanding an independent investigation on the boy's death. The protests continued all throughout the day. Videos show special police forces were deployed there to suppress the unrests. Concerns over whether the boy was targeted for his organs are rising on the internet. Now, information circulating online suggests the student's family may have been oppressed. Meanwhile, the parents have remained silent for days. Flora Hua, NTD News.
And now, as horrifying as that seems, is not an isolated case. Last September, a high schooler in China's city of Tianjin was announced dead in a hospital where he was getting treatment. His family discovered his liver had been taken, with other organs reportedly stabbed. He reportedly fell out of a school building from the second floor, and the school's nurse confirmed that his bones were fractured. And in northeastern Thailand, a construction crane fell onto a moving passenger train, causing a derailment that killed at least 30 people. Dozens more were injured. Here's more.
The accident occurred after a construction crane collapsed onto 3 carriages in Siku district, about 140 miles northeast of Bangkok. The train was traveling from the capital to Ubon Ratchathani when the crane, which was part of a high-speed rail project, fell onto it, causing it to derail and briefly catch fire. Authorities say more bodies remain trapped inside the wreckage, but recovery efforts were paused after the crane shifted, posing further danger. Transport Minister Pipat Ratchakiprakan said 195 passengers were on board and ordered a full investigation. Images from the scene show overturned carriages and firefighters battling flames as smoke billowed. The elevated line under construction is part of Thailand's planned high-speed rail network, which is being built above existing tracks.
The collapse section is part of a Beijing-backed high-speed railway project connecting China with Southeast Asia. The section where the accident took place had a budget of over $5 billion and is closely linked to China's Belt and Road Initiative. The U.S. has long criticized the initiative as a debt trap, with fatal accidents in such projects involving Chinese companies also raising safety concerns. In response, a Beijing spokesperson said today that the collapse section was being built by a Thai company, but an official from Thailand said the project's contractor is Italian-Thai Development, with the Chinese company responsible for the design and construction supervision. We'll keep you updated. And highway officials issuing an urgent warning after deadly crashes have been linked to Chinese replacement airbags. They're saying the airbags were involved in at least 10 crashes, 2 leading to serious injuries and 8 resulting in death. Officials say the crashes should not have been fatal. After previous crashes, all 10 drivers had their airbags replaced by ones made by a Chinese manufacturer known as DTN. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the airbags were likely illegally imported. The highway administrator said the DTN airbag inflators malfunctioned in crashes, sending large metal fragments into drivers' chests, necks, eyes, and faces. The crashes involved Chevy Malibus and Hyundai Sonatas, though officials could not confirm the risk is limited to these makes and models. The Highway Administration is urging drivers to check their vehicle history and stop driving immediately if one of these inflators is found. Stay safe. And the United States has formally greenlit Nvidia's H200 chip sales to China. The move is expected to kickstart the company's sales of its second most powerful artificial intelligence chips. Some conditions apply. China cannot receive more than half the total quantity of chips sold to U.S. consumers. The chips must also be first reviewed by a third-party lab to confirm their technical capabilities. That's before they're exported. President Trump announced in December he would allow the chip sales in exchange for a 25% fee that goes to the U.S. government. And the move comes despite concerns the Communist Party could use the technology to supercharge its military or boost China in the AI race. Nvidia says its H200 chips supercharge generative AI with game-changing performance and memory capabilities. And concerns rising over plans for a massive new Chinese embassy in London and what's underneath it. Planning documents suggest the underground rooms of the proposed embassy would sit dangerously close to some of the UK's most sensitive communications infrastructure. The proximity is raising concerns in both the UK and here in America. Here's more.
The proposed Chinese embassy would cover about 237,000 square feet and include more than 200 rooms underground, making it China's largest embassy in Europe. That's based on planning drawings obtained by the Daily Telegraph earlier this week. Notably, the documents show one basement room located just over 3 feet away from high-speed fiber optic cables. Those cables carry financial transactions, emails, and online messages for millions of users, linking UK data centers to transatlantic cables connecting to the United States. One senior U.S. official told the Telegraph that Washington is deeply concerned about adversaries exploiting critical infrastructure belonging to close allies. And House China Committee Chairman John Mulliner says he opposes the plan, warning American data could also be at risk. The UK is expected to decide whether to approve the embassy before January 20th. It comes as Prime Minister Keir Starmer prepares for a possible visit to China later this month.
And still to come, snowboarder Chloe Kim says she's heading to the Winter Olympics. The announcement comes as she deals with a bad shoulder injury. And a new exhibition in Florida dives into the work of a famous Dutch painter. The installation gives visitors an opportunity to appreciate his 17th century masterpieces. After the break. Welcome back. I'm Paul Graney. Snowboarder Chloe Kim says she's going to the Milan Olympics. The athlete made the announcement after tearing a muscle in her shoulder during a training run last week in Switzerland.
You know, I went through a bunch of different waves of emotions, but honestly, I'm really excited for this week. I'm actually picking my man up from the train station in a few minutes, so we decided to kind of make a trip out of it. I think once I get through this week, I'll feel a lot better.
Kim won the last 2 Olympic gold medals in the half-pipe event, and the 25-year-old would be the heavy favorite to win in Italy if she's 100% healthy. She said she won't compete this weekend and didn't mention the Winter X Games in Aspen later this month as the last big competitions before the Olympics. The women's Olympic half-pipe event starts February 11th. And registration for the 2028 Summer Olympics ticket lottery opened this morning with millions of tickets up for grabs. And NTD's Christina Corona tells us how to get them.
Registration for the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics ticket lottery opens Wednesday, January 14th at 7 a.m., giving fans a chance to secure tickets to the games. Single tickets start at $28, with about 14 million tickets expected to be released for the Olympics and Paralympics. Here's how it works. Fans will create a profile and enter the lottery on Wednesday. Winners will be randomly assigned a time slot to buy tickets, which will be sent via email. Los Angeles area residents, along with fans in Oklahoma City, where softball and canoe slalom events will be held, qualify for a special early access window. To qualify, your credit card billing address must match zip codes in Los Angeles, Orange, Riverside, San Bernardino, or Ventura counties in California, or Canadian or Cleveland counties in Oklahoma. Early access runs April 2nd through April 6th for those who register by March 18th. The 2028 Olympics will be held at several iconic Southern California venues. The LA Memorial Coliseum and SoFi Stadium will host the opening and closing ceremonies. Track and field will compete at the Coliseum during the first week of the games, with swimming scheduled for the second week at SoFi Stadium. Venice Beach will host the triathlon. Long Beach and Carson will be major hubs, hosting volleyball, rowing, canoe sprint, handball, rugby sevens, track cycling, and tennis. Riviera Country Club will host golf. The Los Angeles Convention Center will host fencing, judo, table tennis, taekwondo, and wrestling, while the Pasadena Rose Bowl Aquatic Center will host diving. The 2028 Summer Olympics run July 14th through July 30th. Christina Corona, NTD News.
And the new exhibition in Florida is diving into the work of a famous Dutch painter. The installation is allowing visitors an opportunity to appreciate his 17th century masterpieces and his influence on others. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more on the artist.
Rembrandt is making a stop in the Sunshine State. His work is on display in Florida as part of Art and Life in Rembrandt's Time, masterpieces from the Leiden collection. One famous work on show is Minerva in her study, painted in 1635. But curator J. Rachel Gustafson says the exhibition shows how he influenced other artists. Young Woman Seated at a Virginal by Johannes Vermeer is one example.
So this exhibit is called Art and Life in Rembrandt's Time, Masterpieces from the Leiden Collection. And essentially what we're looking at here is 76 paintings that span the 17th century, all made by Rembrandt and his contemporaries or even people in his circle that he taught. So you have a few generations, but they all worked and were active in the 17th century in the Netherlands.
27 artists are included in the exhibition. Gustafson explains how Rembrandt's work marked a return to realism.
He's really well known for bringing a formal sense of realism into these compositions, where artists before were much more focused on ideas of idealism or painting the perfect human form. Rembrandt kind of threw that all away and said, I'm going to paint people the way that we see them.
The works by Rembrandt and the other artists featured in the exhibition highlight their technique. Each piece depicts their subject in vivid and realistic detail. Gustafson says the works provide an opportunity for visitors to appreciate talents that came ahead of modern technology.
It's a really transformative experience, and if you're used to perhaps looking at images on a computer screen or on a cell phone screen, this is a place and a moment where you can actually take it in real life and have kind of this portal back in time.
Art and Life in Rembrandt's Time, Masterpieces from the Leiden collection, comes amid the 400th anniversary of the Dutch founding of New Amsterdam on the island of Manhattan. The exhibition runs until March 29th. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
So inspiring. And now, as always, if you have any feedback on the show, maybe you'd like to see us cover something in particular, just send us an email at news.today@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. We're going to cover more news right after this break.